Hola people, how you doing? I hope you're having a damn good day. Welcome back to the channel. And recently I saw that Carlo Ancelotti was thinking about changing his formation, of course the 4-3-3 formation, and reverting it back to the 4-4-2 formation. So in my head I was like, how would that work? How is that going to work? What could possibly happen with Vinicius and Rodrigo? Of course, they've recently signed Joselu, but of course, they recently lost Benzema. So they don't actually have a mainstay striker. Of course, Joselu is that guy. But is he that guy for Real Madrid that's going to start game in, game out? I don't think he is, which is why I think they would more or less have a formation like this on the screen, and one that I have worked technically, instructions-wise and everything, to be able to play like me above. Might I say, it was fantastic playing with this team against Sevilla. It was really like a fun game to play. So these are the tactics we have. This is the team we have. Let me go through it. Of course, we've got Vinicius as a striker, Rodrigo as a striker. We've got Valverde as a right wing / right midfielder, Kroos and Tchouaméni in the middle of the park. We've got Modric, yes, Modric as a left midfielder / left winger. We've got Camavinga as a marauding left back. We've got Alaba and Militao as the holding centre-back partnership. We've got Carvajal, of course, and then Courtois. On the bench, we've got Joselu, Brahim, Gula, and Bellingham, both new signings. Of course, another new signing is Garcia, of course, Rudiger and Lunin. And then in the reserves, you've got Mendy, Fernandez, Vasquez, Ceballos, Odriozola, Vallejo, Tobias, and so on. I mean, the rest of these players are more or less non-starters, I guess. But yes, that is the team. So let's hop into the formation. As you can see there, I've gone with just a current flat 4-4-2 formation. As for the tactics, however, this is where things get slightly more interesting. So we've gone with the pressure on heavy touch. We want Madrid to still have that good counter press that still unsettles the opposition a fair amount. And obviously, pressure after heavy touch is one of those things that will definitely do it. Because, of course, they're not the youngest team anymore. They have attracted and brought in some young players, but a lot of their starters, and when I say starters and old players, it's mainly Kroos and Modric, and yeah, more or less. But they are part of that midfield engine, so you're not going to try and overwork them nearly as much as what they would be. Or should be, essentially, with a constant press or press after loss of possession. You want them to more or less wait for the opposition to make a mistake, and then they trigger the press and you know, exert less stamina so you can preserve it for the attacking outlets. So as for the width, of course, Modric and Valverde, they're not wingers. I mean, Valverde, you could argue, potentially has a case to be a winger. Has played there in the Champions League final, of course, but Modric you can definitely say is not a winger. He's mainly been played as a midfielder his entire career, and therefore, in terms of the width, you want them to be very compact and narrow and hard to break down, because the likes of Camavinga as a left back, he's not really a left back either. I mean, there's a lot of weird interchanging parts that happen in this team that make it so damn good and, like I said, fun to play with. So yeah, so you want them to be very narrow, compact, hard to break down, hard for the opposition to pass the ball through them. They'll have to find ways around them or get very lucky. Sevilla, on the other hand, were not able to do that against me. As for the depth, you want it still somewhat high, set as a 60. Of course, with two banks of 4 and 2 strikers up front, it is somewhat seen as a very defensive, counter-attacking formation, which really does suit the way that this team will play. I mean, you've got 2 very fast strikers up front now with Vinicius and Rodrigo. You've got ball players like Modric, Valverde, Kroos, and Tchouaméni who can get the ball to them as fast as possible, hit the long balls over the top. So it does work out quite well, but you still want them to have a very high press. I mean, you can drop it down if you want to play a more counter-attacking system, but this is not that. I didn't want to say, oh, it's just a counter-attacking system. It's not. It's a system that works in possession, and it's a system that can work definitely out of possession. Now, as for the offensive play, we have slow build-up and possession play. Of course, you want the likes of Kroos to pick up the ball from the midfield, from the defenders and play it into the midfield, or Tchouaméni to drive the ball deeper into the opposition's half. You want Modric to get on the ball as a winger hybrid player and spark magic offensively wise. So you want to provide the offensive players with more time on the ball, and you do that by having slow build-up play and possession. Of course, you can literally trigger the counter-attacking system in this system itself by double tapping L1 and allowing Rodrigo and Vinicius, of course, just to run and outrun the opposition's defense and get him behind them, of course. We will get to the instructions sooner or later, don't you worry. As for the width, we have it set on 50. Like I said, you don't want it to be too wide because the likes of Modric and Valverde are not seen as natural wingers. And then, of course, the likes of Carvajal and Camavinga, they can get forward, but we will see Camavinga be more involved as a left winger slash fullback, left wing back-esque player. It's very cool when you actually set them these tactics and you actually use them, because there were times where I was playing and I was like, Camavinga is literally parking on the left wing, and it was very cool. And you'll see in the gameplay above, or if you try these tactics, of course. As for players in the box, I have it set to 6. You don't want to overload the box at all. You want Camavinga more or less on the edge of the box as that left wing back. You want Modric more or less on the edge of the box with the likes of Tchouaméni, Valverde, and Kroos. And then, of course, maybe one of them running into the box with the likes of Rodrigo and Vinicius. But, of course, there's no real aerial threat, so you don't want to overpack the box when you're not even going to deliver many crosses. Of course, there can be some good crosses that can be played throughout the game, but more times than not, look to try and drive the ball across the face of goal for a tap-in. That's just how I viewed this team, because we don't have a Benzema-esque player. I mean, maybe if Joselu comes into the team and starts playing, that could be slightly different. But until then, I would think, just try and get the ball, keep the ball on the ground, where Vinicius and Rodrigo have more advantage over the opposition. As for corners, we have it set to 4. That is when the likes of Militao, Alaba, Rudiger, and so on, they have the height and can be more involved. And as for free kicks, we have it set to 4 as well. Now, as for the instructions, we've got Thibaut Courtois. He's set to come for crosses, and that's that balance. He's not the best sweeper keeper. He's not going to play that role really that well. So it's a realistic approach for Thibaut Courtois. He's going to claim crosses into that come into the box. He's going to take control of his little technical box, and he's going to make the most of it, of course. As for Alaba and Militao, they're set to just their default instructions. But what I liked is, because Camavinga bombs forward a lot more, and we'll get to that sooner or later, because he bombs forward more, Alaba kind of plays as like a left centre-back, left-back type player, which is kind of nice. It is very nice. So, yeah. And then as for Camavinga, who we just spoke about, his role is set to join the attack and play as an inverted player. So my thinking when giving him these instructions was, I want him more involved in the midfield builder play, but because of Modric's instructions from time to time, he tends to overlap Modric, which is kind of cool and kind of weird at the same time, because I've told him clearly to invert, which he does do. But like I say, sometimes he tends to overlap, and that allows him to play as a left winger and allow him to fire crosses into the box for the potential goals that may be scored. And then as for the defensive possession, his is set to step up. Now, as for Carvajal, we have him set on balanced attacking runs. Now, I did this because if you have both fullbacks bombing forward, especially in this formation, you don't really have an out-and-out DM to slot in and create a back three. So if you have both fullbacks bombing forward in this situation, it creates just a solidary back two, and it's a very exposed defense. So he is more or less set to balanced attack. So when Camavinga has the ball on the left, he will then drop in and somewhat create a back three with the likes of Toni Kroos, somewhat shielding that defense. And then as for his run type, it is set to overlap. Of course, you want some overlapping Valverde. That is what he is good at doing. And of course, Valverde is not the fastest player. And then defensive position, you want him to step up as well. Then, as for Toni Kroos, he is going to be the guy that collects the ball off the back four, like I mentioned earlier, and play it into the attack, into the midfield, and so on. Get the ball rolling. He is going to be the engine starter, of course. But his attacking support is set to stay back, so he'll be slightly further back than Tchouaméni, who will be more of the box-to-box role. He is also set to stay on the edge of the box. Of course, you want him to collect the ball, recycle it, look for the openings, the spaces. Of course, interception set to normal. You don't want him to overexert himself in any way, shape, or form. He is quite old, but then the interesting thing is with him is he's got free roam, so he's allowed to more or less control the horizontal axis of this midfield a lot more, whereas Tchouaméni will be able to control the vertical axis a lot more. So he'll be getting forward a lot, whereas Kroos will be sweeping up, collecting the ball, spraying it, and so on. And then of course he is set to cover center. You don't want him running on the wing or anything like that. One, he's not fast enough. Two, he doesn't have the stamina to do so. And three, him just being in front of the back four, collecting the passes and dictating play suits him and his role a lot more. Now, as for Tchouaméni, a man who has been linked with moves to Arsenal and so on and so on and so on, he has got a very good role. Not very much the DM role that we expected him to play at Real Madrid, but in this system, he's more of the box-to-box-esque player. So his attacking support is set to balance attack. So that means if Real Madrid are under the cosh, he will tuck in from time to time and help Toni Kroos just flood the midfield area, and he will make sure that he is there to collect passes or stray passes from the opposition, and then potentially start a counter-attack. He's also set to stay on the edge of the box. Like I said, it's very much like the Toni Kroos role. You want him to collect the ball, recycle possession, wait for the opportunities to attack. As for interceptions, it's set to normal. Goes without saying. You could probably put it on aggressive, but then it would tire him out a lot, and that would not be great. Although, you do have a damn near Jude Bellingham on the bench who would be perfect for this role as well. I just went with Tchouaméni because in the reports I read that Carlo Ancelotti is going to switch to a 4-4-2. It did say that Tchouaméni would be best suited for it, so I went with him instead. And then as for positioning freedom, stick to position. Of course, you can't have two free roaming midfielders in just a midfield two, so he has got to be a bit more sound with his positioning awareness and everything, and his ability to get forward and so on. So he will be more or less stuck to this left-hand side of the field, whereas Kroos will have more of a fluid role, interchanging from time to time. And then as for the defensive position, he is free to cover the wing. Speaking of wingers, we've got a very old man right here. I think he's like 36 or 37 years old, Luka Modric. He could be a little bit old, let me know down below. But his defensive support is set to basic. You don't want him coming back, you don't want him staying forward, you just want him to be in and around the team. We want him more involved in the midfield build-up play, which is why I have set him to cut inside and come short, of course. So he'll be not really a winger, which is why I said Camavinga, who is set to be an inverted fullback, he sometimes tends to overlap, which is really, really cool and adds a nice dynamic to the game. As for support on crosses, you want him set to balance, so you don't always want him in the box. You have the likes of Vinicius and Rodrigo for that, but he will be in and around the box for a potential loose ball, but he will also be there to help support the midfield too in recycling the ball and possession. I must say this team's possession stats were really, really good in the game above, so yeah, it was really cool. And then of course interception set to normal. As for the other winger, Valverde, he is set to come back on defense, cut inside, come short, get into the box, and aggressive interceptions. I think it goes without saying that this is like the guy who works the hardest in the team. One thing that always reminds me of Valverde is, or one situation where I always think of Valverde is that moment where he took a red card, chopped down, I think it was Morata, who was in on goal. He has just got that dog in him, which is why I've gone for a more aggressive approach with him as the right winger / right midfielder. So he will also be more involved in and around the box. He'll be looking to make a deeper run into the back post from time to time, get into the box, of course. So he won't be looking to stay on the edge of the box and help rotate and recycle possession. He'll be more or less looking for the running, cutting ball in, and maybe laying off a pass, taking a shot on himself. And of course, you want him more involved in the midfield to stack and pack that midfield as much as possible to try and win the midfield battle, of course. Now, finally, we move on to the strikers. I know it's been a little bit of a long video, but I've really enjoyed making this tutorial, and I want you guys to try and replicate it as best as possible. So, Rodrigo, he will more or less be the out-and-out striker in the team. So he is said to have a balanced width when it comes to the support run. So you don't want him drifting wide. You want him more or less balanced. So he will be central from time to time, and he will potentially draw the opposition's defensive centre-backs out of position from time to time with the odd occasional drift. You know, he might drift wide from time to time. You want him to get in behind. Of course, he's got loads of pace to burn. But now this is where things get interesting. For your front men, and of course Valverde, you want them to have that trigger to have the counter press in play. So he is said to have aggressive interceptions on, and of course defensive support is set to basic. So you don't want him coming back, you don't want him staying forward. You want it more or less like a Luka Modric-esque role where he's in and around and can trigger the counter attack. Same thing for Vinicius, but this time slightly different. We've got him on drift wide, so he will be the guy more or less always pulling the opposition's centre-backs / full-backs out of position with his ability to run him behind and then drift wide. Of course, we have him on get him behind as well. Aggressive interceptions, like I mentioned earlier. and then basic defensive supports. So that is the Vinicius role. We scored a shit ton of goals against Sevilla. So yeah. But anyway, peeps, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, smash that thumbs up button. It lets me know I'm doing a good job. So thank you very much. Appreciate all the support over like the last few weeks. And of course, until the next time, I hope you have a damn great day.